Mary, we welcome all visitors and members to this celebration of the Eucharist. As a community of believers, we gather in prayer in order that we might encounter Christ through word and sacrament. Just a reminder that the singing during Mass will be done by the cantor. We invite you to hum along or listen with your ears and heart as the words are sung. Together, let us give thanks to God who brings us together to strengthen and grace our efforts in sharing the life of Christ and being the love of Christ. Please stand as we begin.
There once was a wise guy, perhaps you've heard of him. His name is Einstein. And he once said, "Everything has changed except our thinking." Everything has changed except our thinking. And isn't that the truth? Why, even though everything around us, everything about life is constantly changing, it seems as though it's our way of thinking, it's our mind that is always a day late and a dollar short. So what are we to make of this? What are we to make of our minds that so oftentimes struggle to keep pace with the ever-changing life that is ours, that is like a constant flowing river? Our life is like a constant flowing river. And with the ebbs and flows that is our life, why, eventually those stones that have jagged edges can eventually, through the rippling of the water, can all of a sudden smoothen those rocks out. It is through the ebbs and flows of life that we encounter twists and turns. We also encounter moments of stagnation, but nonetheless, there's always the ebb and the flow that is our life. And so, even though things are always changing around us, among us, and within us, the mind is slow to catch up because we get set in our ways. We have made up our minds, and we do it often. And because of it, automatically what happens then, when we make up our minds, as those, it seems, two sons did in today's gospel, well, then all of a sudden what can happen is the chambers of the heart close. And all of a sudden that free-flowing river that is our life, all of a sudden it gets backed up. It has those self-made dams that we put in there that prohibit the flow from truly happening and giving you and I and the people around us the life that we so often seek and desire. And yet there's good news in today's gospel, because both sons have something in common. They both change their minds. The first one changes for the better. He says no, but whether it's guilt or whatever it might be, eventually he decides he should do the will of his father, and he should go work in the vineyard. The second son likewise changes his mind. He says the right words, "Yep, I'll go," but decides not to go. So both change their minds, one for the better, one for the worse. But nonetheless, in changing their minds, of course, we begin to realize then when Jesus asks the question of you and I, which one did the Father's will? And of course, we quickly, along with the Pharisees and the elders in today's gospel, we quickly answer the first. And in answering that, my friends, then you and I, why, we place judgment upon ourselves. And the judgment that we place upon ourselves is, then we too must realize that even though at times we say no, and even though at times we've made up our minds and we refuse to change, why then all of a sudden, hopefully, through persistence, through prayer, through reflection, through moments of adversity, Hopefully you and I can likewise then change our minds and do what God is asking us to do. And what is God asking us to do? Well, St. Paul makes it very clear in today's second reading, doesn't he? If there's any encouragement, if there's any compassion, if there's any mercy, if there's anything under the sun of anything of importance, be of one mind, St. Paul says. And what is that one mind? Do nothing out of selfishness or out of vainglory. Rather, humbly regard others as more important than yourselves. Humbly regard others as more important than yourselves. That's what John the Baptist came to preach. That's what the tax collectors and the prostitutes believed in John the Baptist, because John was saying you need more than just to speak the words, "Yep, I'll go," but you have to put action behind it. There needs to be some work in the vineyard that comes with the words, "Yep, I'll go." And so that is God's will for you and I, that we love the Lord our God, that we love our neighbor as we love ourselves, and the only way we can love God is to love one another, to humbly regard others as more important than ourselves, that ultimately each and every day we strive to the best of our abilities to be of service to the other, to be of service to the other, that ultimately it cannot be about ourselves and what we want and what we desire. And I've come to believe that even though I had made up my mind 30 years ago that the most important thing was to come to know God, to come to know God. It was, of course, after having spent 8 years of study, it was after having spent 4 years in the major seminary that I was convinced that the most important thing in life was for you and I to know God. That was 30 years ago. And I thank God for the river of life. And I thank God for the waters that continue to wash over those rocks and to polish them and refine them through age and experience and lived wisdom. Because today I no longer believe that. I no longer believe that you and I are called upon to know God because through the help of spiritual writers and spiritual thinkers and spiritual mystics, I've come to realize this one truth. We can never know God. We can never know God. And for you and I to presume that, why, that's not humility, that's arrogance. We can only experience God. We cannot know him with our minds. We cannot know him with our hearts. We can only experience God by being of one mind and one heart. We can only experience God by choosing to live our life each day in service to the other. And when we do that, why then we will encounter and we will experience a God who teaches us that nothing is more important than life, than to give of ourselves, to humbly empty ourselves for the sake of the other. Because when we do so, then we shall know fulfillment. We shall know fullness. We shall know life in the Lord.